Good morning. Good morning to all of you who are in the sanctuary and all who are watching our live stream from Unitarian Universalist congregation of Grand Traverse. I am Marianne Rivers, a member of the Sunday Service Committee, and Dan Tholen, also a member of the committee, is working with me today to coordinate this service. We welcome all who've joined us this morning, whether you are visiting for the first time or have attended for a long time. To share in the community of our congregation, we have set aside a time for joys and concerns. If you are streaming us now, use the chat before the end of the prelude, and your words will be brought to Betsy to use later in the service. If you're here in the sanctuary, there is a book over to my right, and you can write in that. Lovely penmanship, please, and make it easy for Betsy to read, and then she will use both of those editions later on in the service. We welcome all who come in peace and love and justice to gather with us on this morning. Our service is really a continuation of Reverend Alex's A God of My Own Understanding 1, which was presented earlier in March. We will be hearing today from 4 members of the congregation telling us about the God of their understanding. Here are some words from one of our favorite poets, Mary Oliver, The Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. It calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Now, Dusty Colton will give us a short update on the stewardship campaign.
I'm Dusty Colton. I'm a member of your stewardship team. As always, I want to express our heartfelt thank you to all that have pledged and have fulfilled the financial part of stewardship. I have an update of figures of our annual budget drive. As of last Thursday, we have 53 pledges totaling $140,830. That's 52% of our goal. And that's the 53 pledges, however, is only 46% of those received last year. That's 61 fewer pledges. However, I have in my pocket a pledge from this morning, so we're down to 60. I'm sure there are more pledges in the pipeline right now, but we need to double, even more if we can, our pledge numbers. The average pledge is up nearly $400, and that shows how generous and caring we are. Remember, this is an average. Some give more, some give less. All pledges of any amount are important. We have some new pledgers. If you've not given in the past, please join us. A no pledge fails to move us towards our goals. This 140,830 is a good start, but we need those other pledges. Remember, our ministerial and worship services, adult and youth educational programs, our joyous music, our pastoral and ministerial activities, support for our committees and groups, and maintaining our building and our grounds, and our community social justice and compassionate outreach, which includes the community lunch, safe harbor, and the multiple groups that we support, all depend fully or in part on these pledges. Though today is the last official Sunday of the annual budget drive, it really does not end today. We will be asking, reminding, and accepting pledges all spring, right through the end of the fiscal year. However, the Financial Committee will be looking at these pledge numbers in 2 weeks to see how far we've climbed up towards our goal and to determine over the next month what the budget will be next year. What we're able to continue to do will depend greatly on these numbers. I encourage all of you to look carefully at your personal situation and please pledge. I know many of us are now wisely mature and income is less flexible. Please pledge at whatever fits your personal situation. If you have not availed yourself of utilizing the use of charitable giving via required minimum distribution, please check on that with your financial advisor. You may save some tax expenses. Finally, after saying all this, pledge or no pledge, people and community are our greatest resource. Thank you. And now, the prelude, Quiet, will be played live for us by Amanda.
Good morning. Today's opening words are from Help, Thanks, and Wow, the three essential prayers by Anne Lamott. Let's not get bogged down on whom or what we pray to. Let's just say prayer is a communication from our hearts to a great mystery, or goodness, or Howard, to the animating energy of love we are sometimes bold enough to believe in, to something unimaginably big, but not us. We could call this force not me, or not preachers on stage with a choir of 800, or for convenience, we could just say God. As we enter into this time together, we acknowledge the land on which we live and gather, the land known to the Anishinaabe as Kitchiwi-Quidong, the place of the Big Bay. We raise the birch bark basket holding the four sacred medicines of sweetgrass, cedar, sage, and tobacco to remind us to hold space for the Anishinaabe as we work to reconcile the harm of colonization. As Unitarian Universalists, it's our practice each Sunday to light the flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith and a light for our search for deeper truths. For our chalice lighting words this morning, I thought it would be appropriate to let God tell us who they are, as they first revealed themselves to Moses in the flame of the bush that burned but was not consumed, as recorded in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. Thus shalt you say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me to you. We sound the bell this morning, calling us into this sacred time set apart from our full lives. I invite you to follow the sound as it fades into silence and as we enter this time of worship together. Our opening song this morning is Ancient Love by Carolyn McDade, performed by Lynn McAndrews and Renee Russell. Please feel free to rise during the music, in body or spirit as you're comfortable and able. Join in singing if we can, and just moving if you'd like.
Long before the night was born from the darkness, long before the dawn rolled unsteady from fire, long before she
Good morning. We seem to all be on one side of the room and the other side is empty. That's not part of my prepared words. It's so good to be here in the sanctuary together with all of you that are here. It's a little blustery today, and I imagine that's why so many didn't come that we've been seeing in the past. And there's those that are on YouTube. We hope to see you here soon. It's been just over 2 years since we closed our doors and started having Zoom meetings that our fantastic staff and technological capable members were able to develop. Over those 2 years, we as a congregation have supported each other, developed a safer facility, and installed state-of-the-art video and audio capabilities. We hired a wonderful new settled minister and supported many wonderful causes in our community. We have lived our seven principles to the fullest and are currently discussing the 8th beloved community. Together, we have taken many leaps of faith, somewhat focusing on the concept of build it and they will come. And when needed, our fantastic community will step up and be stewards of whatever is needed through time, talent, and financial resources. Chris and I have been associated with UUCGT since 2014, when we were warmly and enthusiastically welcomed by John Hort. We became involved with the Wednesday night potlucks, where we began our journey of meeting many congregation members. We got involved with a membership committee where I made an offhand comment, or when I made an offhand comment to the chairperson at the time, Kathy Annalyn, at an event at Cordia. Since then, we have been receiving from and giving to UUCGT in many different ways. After several medical events, we received support of food, warm blankets, sharing, and concern from many in the congregation. After our home fire in 2019, many members appeared within hours with food and caring that continued until we were able to return to our home 1.5 years later. Sharing our time, talents, and financial resources with others in the congregation has really led to a special feeling of UUCGT being a second home that needs tender, loving care to preserve it for future generations. This year's budget drive is coming to end, as Dusty told us, and others have shared in the last 3 weeks. It is important that we all share in this important financial stewardship of UUCGT. As noted in the Widening the Circle brochure, the overall cost of maintaining UUCGT in the 2022-2023 fiscal year will be $350,000. The Stewardship Committee and Finance Committee expects that $270,000 of that would come from pledges. Each of us has to evaluate what we can give individually. Some of us have more resources than others, and thus will be able to contribute more. Chris and I have found that the more we give, the more joy we receive. With the increased level of the federal standard deduction, Chris and I have found using it instead of itemizing all of our expenses has decreased the amount of time that it takes for me to fill out our taxes, and it's also saved paperwork. By using the Qualified Charitable Distribution, or QCD, that Dusty just mentioned, to pay paid for from our required minimum distribution to give to charitable organizations, we have further been able to decrease our taxes, since the QCD amount is directly removed from the amount of tax owed. The resulting savings in the amount of tax has allowed us to increase our giving to UUCGT without affecting our overall budget. As Emily Mitchell mentioned last week, we have a wonderful staff that needs to be paid living wages. We have a beautiful building that we need to maintain. We have a fantastic young minister who we overwhelmingly voted to be our minister. And we all have expressed the need to pay our full fair share of UUA dues. Over the last year, the value of those dues to UUA was returned to UUCGT through UUA's wonderful programs of helping ministers search and find congregations. Many members have joined and grown spiritually in the UUA developed Soul Matters program. Betsy and Alex have recently been trained in OWL program, which will be offered this fall. We have been widening the circle, and the proposed budget will continue that needed trend. All of these are reasons that Chris and I have increased our pledge again this year. Please pledge whatever fits your situation. It all helps. And please return your pledge as soon as possible so Dusty and the Finance Committee can prepare a workable budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year that will be supported by your pledges. You will be able to review that developed budget in time for the annual meeting. Thank you. And now we will have the offering.
Thank you, Rick. Stewardship, of course, is the foundation of the congregation, and all we do pledges principal source of revenue. So please, if you haven't gotten it in yet, today is a good day. We also have baskets, which will be passed during the meditation music. Thank you, Chris. You can see two sides of the basket to support our outreach to the community and the weekly lunch and safe harbor, among other activities, and then the other side supports our congregation. At home, you can contribute in three ways: mailing a check, donating on our website, or through the Give Plus app. Please be generous. And now Amanda will play while the baskets are passed.
It is our practice as a religious community to set aside time in our service to name and honor the joys and concerns that mark our lives, the milestones and moments of our lived experience. I will be sharing the joys and concerns that have been offered up for us to hold on our hearts today. From Nancy Doty. Please keep my husband Bob Doty in your healing thoughts as he recovers in Munson rehab program. From Anne Sweeney. Once again, hoping and praying for peace in this world. If you have a joy or concern that's a bit too heavy to share, I invite you to reach out to Reverend Alex or to the congregational care team, or to simply hold it on your hearts as you are held in this community. And now we light a final candle and pause for all the joys and concerns that remain in the silence of our hearts. And Maura Brennan will now share her own understanding of God.
Good morning. What is my understanding of God and how has it evolved over time? I was raised Catholic, so as a child, God was the white man in the sky with the flowing gown, all powerful. But even in catechism, I remember thinking, this doesn't make any sense. How could this all-knowing, all-loving God let so many bad things happen in the world? Adam and Eve punished for eating from the tree of knowledge? I thought knowledge was good. And if prayers can actually change the future, God must have control over everything, so why doesn't he just fix everything? The parish priest at St. Bernardine's, where we attended, didn't help much. Father Kress talked longer about how much money we should be putting in the basket than about sharing any wisdom about how we should navigate this chaotic world. And some of my extended family were very religious. I remember being at a cousin's house for the weekend and an elderly family member died. We were all called inside, all 7 children and visiting cousins, to kneel in the living room and say the rosary, the entire rosary. I didn't have any spiritual awakening after that. In fact, I remember thinking, what good is this doing anyone? And thank God my parents don't make us do this. No pun intended. The older I got, the more negative I felt about God. It seems to me that the people who professed a belief in God considered themselves part of an exclusive club that you had to pledge to belong to. God loved everyone, except if you don't believe in him, or don't confess your sins, then you're going to hell. The hypocrisy of it irked me, but still, somehow unconsciously, I felt a little left out of the club. And there was always that shred of doubt. What if I was wrong? I consider myself an agnostic into my 20s, without much searching for any further answer to the God question. But by the time I graduated from college, I was a devout atheist. I had learned a little bit more about history and the role that allegiances to a particular god had played in the world conflict and empire building. I came to believe that the concept of God was nothing more than a way for the powers that be to control the masses. Worst of all, people used it as an excuse for not tackling the world's problems because God will take care of it. It's God's will. It was with this physical revulsion to the word God that I landed here at UUCGT in the mid-90s. And that is when my spiritual journey really began. I remember the first time I attended a service here, which was about 1996, walking out and thinking, well, that wasn't too bad. Nobody said anything from the podium that offended me. That's how low the bar was. It was only after I became a part of this community that accepted my atheism that I really started to have some sense of spirituality. And I realized that a lot of the righteousness and anger that I held about the word God was really a reaction to my latent Catholic guilt for not believing in God. Once I fully accepted myself as a non-believer with no reservations or shame, I slowly lost that knee-jerk revulsion to the word God. I'm not going to lie, it took a lot of Kevin Tarsa and Emmylou Belcher saying, if the word God offends you, feel free to substitute love or the universe or whatever works for you in its place. But slowly the word God ceased to cause me to bristle or hold any power at all. I was an atheist. Some people were theists. That is all. Neither is better or worse. Ironically, it is only then, when I experience this acceptance of my real beliefs, or lack of beliefs, that when I had truly cast off any shame in not believing in God, that I began to get curious. I began to get curious about the mysteries surrounding human existence and human suffering, and I began to explore spirituality. And when I get curious, I read. I read Thoreau and Emerson. I read about Buddhism through Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema Chodron. I read Toltec wisdom through the books of Miguel Ruiz. I read Eckhart Tolle, and I began to see that even the concepts of my catechism were explained differently by some of these authors. Parables were reframed. Tolle says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." When Jesus said that, he was referring to those who travel light without inner baggage or identification with things, mental concepts, or addictions. I began to get involved in the Pioneers movement. Pioneers are biological pioneers that believe the universe is not random chaos, but is a complex system of organisms which are all alive, all connected, all intelligent, and all relatives. As part of this congregation, I further explored the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. I read about Shakti Gawain, some of her books, one in particular, Living in the Light, in which she says, "There is a universal intelligent life force that exists within everyone and everything. It resides within each one of us as a deep wisdom, an inner knowing. We can access this wonderful source of knowledge and wisdom through our intuition, an inner sense that tells us what feels right and true for us in any given moment." Slowly, my atheism began to transform being exposed to these concepts. One day I was reading a book, and I can't even remember the name of it, and I came across the passage, "You are not a human being having a spiritual experience, you are a spiritual being having a human experience." And I thought, yes, I believe that. And then I stopped and thought, what? Wait a minute. I believe that? I'm not sure that that's really any different than a belief in God. Or maybe it is technically pantheism, the idea that the universe and God are identical. It doesn't matter what you call it. I've come to believe that there's a deep inner knowing, a wisdom, a universal energy, a power, a source that is both within us and of which we are all a part. It connects us to each other like the mycelium below the ground. To me, this source is the living God. I think that Thich Nhat Hanh, for me, says it best when he says, "We are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness." We are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. I believe only then will we truly know God.
Good morning. I'm Sandra McDonald. When Mary Ann asked me to speak today, I probably should put these on, about my understanding of God, I thought that would be an interesting to contemplate. Then she said that she thought my Methodist background might lend a different perspective about God. And I thought, Well, like many of you, I was taught a traditional view of God, old, male, humanish but not, omnipotent, all-knowing and all-seeing, which was scary, kind and loving, but also angry and vengeful and rejecting those who didn't believe in a certain way. Very early, I saw these contradictions and was also aware that all Christians didn't agree about theology. So what should I believe? I was also taught that God was a Trinity, God the Father, the human Son who is kind of sort of God, and a spirit that was floating around somewhere. I settled at some point on the belief that the gods of all religions were one, the Creator, the universal force of love. I also came to believe that a loving Creator would not reject or condemn any of his creation. So now I realize that I was a Unitarian and a Universalist long before I had heard those terms. As an adult, through study in and outside of the church, I came to know of the histories of Christianity and other beliefs and how they were formed, and to believe that the gods of all religions are a human construct, developed from the beginning of human civilizations to help people understand their experience in the universe, to give them comfort, to guide, and to help regulate their societies as they developed. I don't think this is a totally bad thing, not when the beliefs were used in a positive way. I was in Christian churches most of my life, but had let go of Christian theology long before leaving the Methodist Church 8 years ago. Like many Christians, I separated the theology of the church from its social teachings and positive works, which weren't that different from the UU principles. Belief in a religious system isn't all or nothing. This view isn't unusual in Christian communities, and I suspect that it is common in other religions as well. So, what is my understanding of God now? Maybe that God is the force of creation, or that all creation is God. Our wise and wonderful Joan Sheard once said, "I don't know if there is a heaven, but if there is, I know we will all be there." I would add to that, if there is a God, it is all of us. Okay, now having said that, I'm going to veer off topic a bit to something that I do feel my lifetime in Christian churches provides a perspective that may be different. And that is about the belief in a personified God and why it is okay. I have seen and can understand belief in a personal God. Many people, not just Christians, believe every bit as deeply in their perception of God as many UUs believe that there is no God. Belief in a God with which they can communicate is very comforting for them, as are the rituals and traditions of their belief systems, and provides a framework for their lives. Yes, there are many ways of belief and degrees of belief, and sometimes beliefs may be misguided. But belief is not foolish and not ignorance. Some of the wisest, most educated, most intellectual people I have known have had a deep faith in a God, although perhaps with a very modern liberal understanding of their religion's theology. Where I'm going with this is to say that those of us who don't believe in a traditional God need to respect the beliefs of those who do. We need to do so without criticizing, without judgment, and without being smug about what we may consider our superior understanding of the realities of the universe. So, I'm going to close with a quote from Hafez, a 14th century Persian poet, that I happened to come across while I was preparing this. "Everyone, drunk or sober, seeks the beloved, and every place, mosque or church, is the house of love." So everyone, in some aspect, seeks God. Thank you. And now, Dan will offer a reading.
Thank you, Sandra. Today's reading's a very brief story from a famous scientist, educator, writer, and outspoken atheist, Isaac Asimov, as he wrote in Asimov, a memoir. "A couple of months ago, I had a dream, which I remember with utmost clarity. I dreamed I had died and gone to heaven. I looked about and knew where I was: green fields, fleecy clouds, perfumed air, and the distant ravishing sound of the heavenly choir. And there was the recording angel smiling broadly at me in greeting. I said in wonder, 'Is this heaven?' The recording angel said, 'It is.' I said, 'But there must be a mistake. I don't belong here. I'm an atheist.' 'No mistake,' said the recording angel. 'But as an atheist, how can I qualify?' The recording angel said sternly, 'We decide who qualifies, not you.' 'I see,' I said. I looked about, pondered for a moment, then turned to the recording angel and asked, 'Is there a typewriter here that I can use?' Now we'll have another story from Tom Darton. Sorry.
Good morning. My name is Tom Darnton. I serve this congregation as a member of the Board of Trustees. When Mary Ann invited me to speak about the God of my understanding, I immediately thought of a passage from Ralph Waldo Emerson's journals that helped me articulate what had previously been for me indescribable. I grew up in a Unitarian household as a practicing atheist. I was convinced that we humans created God in our own image to explain the otherwise unexplainable. That framing worked for me until I was in my mid-40s when my world came apart. How that came to pass is a long story and not particularly relevant to my message this morning. People I respected at the time strongly encouraged me to engage with an Al-Anon program. As some of you know, the first step of a 12-step program is to acknowledge that one's life has become unmanageable. That was pretty obvious. However, the second of the 12 steps required me to believe in a power greater than myself. Specifically, step 2 required me to believe, step 2 reads, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. How could I proceed, I wondered, when I was so convinced there was no power greater than myself? My sponsor encouraged me to focus on the phrase, came to believe, rather than getting caught up in trying to develop a settled understanding of the higher power. In the vernacular of 12-step programs, fake it till you make it. Not in the sense of deception, but in the sense of trying it on for size. I was encouraged to begin with a what-if approach. What if there was a higher authority whose wisdom I could trust and incorporate, rather than relying on my own resources? As most of you know, recovering from a low point is not a steady upward progression. It is rather a series of ups and downs. After several months in the program, I found myself in a particularly painful downturn, challenging all the work I had done so far. I'd settled into the Al-Anon program, attended meetings, read a lot, and met regularly with my sponsor. I believed I had been working earnestly and yet was slapped down again. Was this downturn evidence that this 12-step stuff was bogus? I was mentally and physically exhausted and in deep emotional pain. But not being ready to throw off all the work I had done, I decided to give connecting with the higher power my best shot. I took myself to a deeply spiritual place, small platform nestled in the sand dunes north of Charlevoix, with an expansive view of the offshore islands and the Gray's Reef Passage. I stood quietly, began breathing deeply, and practiced what I had learned about clearing the clutter from my mind. I concentrated on opening up to guidance, perhaps with a bit of a challenge, as if to say, here I am. If you are out there, prove yourself to me. My life is a mess and I can't seem to fix it. That space I created hovered in the sunlight, perhaps for a breath or two, perhaps longer. Then I received a very clear message. It came from outside of myself and entered my consciousness directly. I experienced it as a sound, but it didn't come through my ears. In a slightly exasperated tone, a clearly male voice boomed, "Go home and get some sleep." I've come to understand that this was a message from my soul, that part of me that is the difference between a living being and an arrangement of organic compounds. I understand that soul to be connected with a greater force existing in the universe, a power beyond my understanding. Humans have been finding different ways to name that power since long before we learned to write. In English, the word to describe that greater power is God. In April 1840, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote these words in his journal, quote, "Gladly I learn that we have these subterranean, say rather, these supersensuous channels of communication, that spirits can meet in their pure upper sky without the help of organs." Emerson was convinced in the existence of that higher authority and described supersensuous communication without the help of organs. It apparently worked for him, and I find it is working for me. And the next speaker is Augustin Gurule.
Good morning. Soy Agustín Gurule. I think all of us at one time or another have asked ourselves if there is a God. And if there is one, who or what is he or she like? My journey to get to know the God of my understanding began when I was 7 or 8 years old. When my sister, 3 years older than I am, said to me, told me that she was going to be a nun and I was going to be a priest. I believed her. At 27, I was ordained a priest, believing that Jesus, as the Son of God, gave himself to us as our spiritual nourishment in the form of bread and wine. I was born a Catholic, in a Catholic family. So for many years, I believed in the God of Christianity. Many years later, reading again in the Judeo-Christian scriptures, that when Moses looked at that burning bush, he asked God, "Lord, who are you?" And the burning bush told him, "I am that am." I realized that, putting grammar aside, what God was saying was, I be being. And since everything that is because it is being, God must be in everything that is. I repeat, since everything is being, God must be in everything that is. This makes absolutely no sense if we believe that God has a form, such as the human form. So, God must be something without a form. He, she, it must be formless, like the wind, sound, energy, spirit. If this is true, then, if God, it is God who hydrates my soul when I drink water. It is God who nourishes me when I eat my food. It is God who inspires me when I breathe. It is God who loves me. It is God who loves us when we love one another, because God is love. And you and I are spirits having a human experience. And you and I were never born, and we will never die. For like Moses' burning bush, you and I are beings. Thank you.
Well, this is our, oh, I'm not on it. This is our first experience after Amanda has been playing the piano, our first experience for a live musician. And I'm going to sing and play a song that I wrote, and it's called There in Your Heart. This is unusual. You tell me that you're looking, say you're on a quest. Oh, you tell me that you need an answer. Well, you know I could have guessed. You have that wondering look in your eye, a touch of sadness too, and you know you're on the brink of finding something wonderful and new. Oh, it's there in your heart, right there in your heart. That's the very first place you have to start. And when you look into the wonder of you, you'll know you carry all the answers. Yes, you do. Some tell you that the answer is written in a book, and you can find salvation there if you just know how to look. Maybe it's a worthy cause, a guru or a church, and you listen and you wonder, then you go out again to search. But it's there in your heart, right there in your heart. That's the very first place you have to start. And when you look into the wonders of you, you'll know you carry all the answers. Yes, you do. This may sound too easy, this loving look at you, but we do our best to make it nearly impossible to do. We put up such strong barriers to keep us from ourselves, 'cause we want to believe the answer's waiting somewhere on a shelf. Can you join me now, those of you who are here? But it's there in your heart, right there in your heart. That's the very first place you have to start. And when you look into the
do.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. This closes our service and this series of 4 services exploring what God, prayer, and faith mean to Unitarian Universalists. As we close, let's consider again some words from Anne Lamott in her Essential Prayers, where she argues that prayer helps because it's not just wishful thinking, it involves projecting to something outside of yourself. She writes, imagining God can be so different from wishful thinking if your spiritual experiences change your behavior over time. Have you become more generous, which is the ultimate healing, or more patient, which is a close second? Did your world become bigger and juicier and more tender? Have you become ever so slightly kinder to yourself? This is how you tell if it helped. So we extinguish the chalice today as an act of faith as well as hope that today's service has lighted our own individual searches for deeper truths and to bring those truths into our daily lives. Go in peace.